When I opened my eyes after weeks of darkness, the sterile white ceiling above me felt unfamiliar, almost foreign, like I had been dropped into a world that had continued without me. The beeping of the machines beside my hospital bed was steady, almost cruelly reminding me that I was alive, yet barely tethered to that life. I tried to turn my head, to search for a familiar face, a comforting voice, anything that would tell me I wasn't completely alone. But all I found was emptiness. My parents, the people who had brought me into this world, weren't there. I thought maybe they had stepped out for a moment, maybe they were grabbing coffee or speaking with a doctor. But hours passed, and still no one came. Nurses passed by, kind faces offering me water and checking my vitals, but not once did anyone say, "Your family is waiting outside." And in that silence, an ache deeper than my injuries began to take root. Days blurred into nights, and the reality became undeniable. My parents had abandoned me. I was just 19, trapped in a fragile body after an accident I could barely remember. Left to heal without the very people I had believed would always stand by me. Each time the door creaked open, my heart leapt with desperate hope, only to be crushed again when it was just another staff member. I watched other patients surrounded by their families, balloons and flowers piling up on their nightstands, voices filled with love and concern echoing through the ward. I had no flowers. I had no visitors. I had nothing but the growing truth that my parents had decided I wasn't worth the inconvenience. As the weeks passed, I learned from whispers among relatives and scraps of overheard conversations that my parents hadn't just stepped away out of fear or pain. They had made a choice. They believed I wouldn't survive, and to them, it was easier to walk away, to leave the burden to doctors and strangers. The people I trusted most decided I was too much trouble, too broken, and so they left me behind as though I were already dead. That kind of betrayal doesn't just wound the heart. It carves scars that never fade. But life has a cruel way of proving people wrong. With every painful breath, every physical therapy session, every tear shed in solitude, I fought. I taught my body to move again, my hands to grip, my legs to bear weight. Every step I took was fueled not just by the will to survive, but by the fire of abandonment burning inside me. They had left me for dead, but I refused to give them that satisfaction. My survival became my revenge. Each heartbeat a defiance against the people who thought I wouldn't matter anymore. Years later, I walked into a courtroom, not as a broken patient, but as a young adult who had clawed their way back from the brink of death. The case wasn't just about me, it was about justice. My parents had more than abandoned me. They had tried to sever all legal ties, to avoid responsibility, to erase me from their lives as though I were a mistake. But what they didn't expect was that I would rise again, and that the system they thought they could manipulate would instead hold them accountable. When I entered that courtroom, the air shifted. I saw their faces for the first time in years. My mother's eyes widened, her hand clutched at her chest. My father's jaw slackened, his body stiff with disbelief. They hadn't expected to ever see me like this, alive, standing tall, ready to face them. Their plan had been to walk away forever, to live guilt-free, unburdened. But in that moment, their carefully built wall of denial crumbled. I was real. I was alive. And I was demanding to be heard. The judge's voice filled the room as evidence was laid out. Proof of neglect, of abandonment, of decisions that had nearly cost me my life. The silence between each statement was heavy, pressing down on the people who once called themselves my parents. I didn't speak much, but my presence alone was enough. I was living proof of what they had done, and the weight of that truth was more than they could bear. As the ruling came down, declaring their actions unjust, stripping away their ability to erase me, something happened that no one expected. My parents broke. My mother's knees buckled, and she collapsed into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. My father, the man who had always carried himself with cold pride, leaned forward, his face buried in his hands, his body shaking. They weren't just facing a legal judgment. They were facing the living embodiment of their betrayal, and it was too much for them to endure.